Welcome to Shareholder Q&A, a production of Gorecom, in which we field questions from shareholders so CEOs can answer them directly via video. And the CEO that we got on today, Andrew Davidson, Royal Helium, trades in Canada, RHC, for our friends in the US, RHCCF. Normally when we do these interviews, I do a bit of an intro, but this one isn't for, prospective and potentially new investors. This is for the existing shareholder crowd who have some specific questions they want answered. So before we get going, Andy, how are you, my friend?
I'm good. I'm good. Thanks for having me back on.
Yeah, I love having you back on, and we get so many people watching and so much reaction for obvious reasons that these are great. Before we get to the questions, because I've been talking to your head of communications, your IR people, and they said, hey, we're getting some questions that are concerns that people are repeating. We want to address them head on. Big picture before we get into that. How well are things going at Royal Helium? How happy are you with where you are right now in your progression?
Yeah, no, we're very pleased with where we're at. I mean, the ramp up process at Steveville is a complex one, but it's moving in the right direction. It's been trending upward since day one. It's a complex process that we use there, and so this is exactly what you'd expect. We have the benefit of having assembled a team that has commissioned helium plants, both purification and liquefaction, all around the world. And what they're telling us is everything you're doing is correct, and the path you're on is the one that everyone is on whenever they start up a plant. It's going exactly as you would expect, and in fact, what we found is the plant is outperforming expectations at these levels. So
Wow.
it's going very well, and you could sort of tell that. And I was hoping it would come across in our last news release by the fact that we are, while still in ramp up, we are shifting focus away to the next two facilities, like to do the exploration work required to do this again and again, and move from 1 to 2 or 3 facilities in the relative short term. So we're comfortable with where we are. We think it's going exceptionally well. Our customer is ecstatic with how things are going. Yeah, things are good.
Yeah, and actually, you stole my thunder on that question because further down, I was actually going to say, when people ask about the trailers where they're shipping, and say how the customers feel. So I'll ask you that again for more specifics.
Sure.
The real thrust we want to get across here is to make sure investors get out of the mindset that this is a flip the switch situation, right? Where you walk in, you flip on the switch, helium comes in, it gets processed and shipped out the door into the trailers, and away you go. There's a ramp up process, and off the air, you brought up an example of the mining business. So that was a great example. Maybe just use that here before we get into the questions, because I really like that.
Sure. I mean, the analogy that I've been giving is when you turn a mine on, it never turns on at full capacity, right? You commission your mine and you start going and you start mining. And it takes a while before you get up to nameplate. The same is true here. I mean, we have a plant with hundreds of individual processes happening at the same time. And the reason there's a ramp up is you get to a certain level of production and you make sure the facility is working perfectly at that level. Then you increase throughput and you go through all those steps again. Because every time you increase flow, you're increasing pressures, you're changing the gas composition a little bit, and all of these little units within our plant need to be adjusted to match what it's seeing at this higher level. And every time we go to a new level, we've got a new suite of issues, and we solve those issues, and then we move on. It's really that simple. And the timeline is predicated by the performance of the plant, not by my specific desires. What I would have loved to have this thing at capacity on day one, but that's just not realistic. That's not how these work.
No. And even given the fact that you're in this, you're supplying a major North American space launch company that's unknown to all of us out here, anyways. But one company that's been in the news time and time again is SpaceX, Elon Musk SpaceX. And we've seen these test fires of his Falcon, I think the Falcon 9. I don't think it's the Falcon Heavy, maybe it's the Heavy, but either way, it's one of the Falcons. And what we see is first they go through a burn of some of the burners, then they come back 3 months later, do a full burn before they launch these into space. So this is the way it goes when you have complicated processes. That's really what we want everyone to understand. You don't go put the rocket on there, blast it off, and let's hope that nothing goes wrong. You take it through tests.
Well, that's just it. I mean, like when we look at our plant, just take one specific example. So one of the trains within our plant is the amine unit, which separates CO2 out. And so if you get that working nicely at 3 million cubic feet a day of throughput at, say, 2% CO2, that's great. That's awesome. You can be consistently online at that rate. But when we increase it to 5 million cubic feet a day, now the pressure has spiked. There is more CO2 going through there. The percentage may have changed depending on which zones we're prioritizing for production. And that requires pulling different levers and turning different knobs to make sure that it's operating efficiently at the new level. And all that takes time because it never works on the first go. I mean, what worked at 3 million cubic feet a day doesn't work at 5, doesn't work at 7, doesn't work at 9, doesn't work at 10, doesn't work at 11, right? Every step you get to has a different combination. But you have to go through those systematic steps to get there. And that's what we're doing. We're following a very rational, well thought out plan developed by both the plant engineers, the folks who designed and spec'd this facility, our own engineers, including our field engineers, as well as the reservoir engineers who designed how best to deplete the formations, right? So there's a lot of different moving parts. We are solving them, and it's working very, very well. And when I made that comment earlier, it's really a function of, given the throughput that we had been putting through here, and this is a comment that or an observation, I guess, we made back in January. We are producing more helium than we should be at the rate we were going through. So the plant is working and working exceptionally well. It's just a matter of balancing it out at every new level of throughput.
All right. And on that note, let's go into the questions that your team has identified are the most common. So we can have you directly address the
Sure.
specifics. All right. So they're no particular order. But the first question that they're getting is, are both wells working? We're hearing chatter that the north well is shut in.
Yeah, well, the answer to that one is yes and yes. Both wells work. Both wells have been run. We don't need both wells right now, so we're operating with the south well, which is right next door to the facility. The
Right.
north well works fine. We don't need it yet. So and people will have to remember when we design this facility to match with the productivity of the wells, we could run one well and hit maximum throughput at this plant. We could hit 11 to 15 million cubic feet a day from one well. So what we have decided to do, what our engineers have decided to do, was commission this plant, get it to capacity using the one well only. The whole purpose of that is to minimize variables through the process, right? So you can control the flow from the one well. So we are not using the north well now. We will be using the north well once we're through and ramped up to full capacity. There's nothing wrong with that well. We just don't need it yet, so we're not running it.
Yeah, so great answer. So someone out there has heard that it's not working and they're thinking there's a problem or a shutdown. You just don't need it. It's there. You don't need it. You'll go through the testing. Once everything's done, that'll be just fine, and just it'll join the parade.
Yeah, well, I mean, you have to remember when you design a plant like this, you have to design it based on specific constituent gases that are flowing through it, right? And in our case, it's a matter of balancing the amount of CO2 going through it for the design specs of the plant, right? And so we've got two different zones that we produce from in that southern well, the one that's actually on. One has higher CO2, one has virtually no CO2. So we're able to achieve that balance using the one well. In a full production scenario, when we move beyond the level we're at now into the 15 million cubic feet a day range, the most efficient way to deplete the reservoir we have there is to use both, right? So we'll produce from the zero CO2 zone in the south well and the higher CO2 zone in the north well. That's where we'll end up. But for now, we're focused on variables at the plant. We're not focused on how best to mix these two wells in terms of throughput rate yet. That'll come later, and that's a much easier question to answer. So we'll get there with the north well. There's no rush on our end to get to it. We're following our path, and the minute that we need that well, it'll be turned on.
Beautiful.
And sorry, I want
Next
to clarify
question.
the reason this comes up as an issue, the reason it gets flagged is because we have monthly reporting that we have to do to the province of Alberta and what we're producing. And because we're not producing from the north well right now, it shows as shut in. So the shareholders aren't wrong by saying, I hear it's shut in. Well, yeah, it is. because we don't need it.
Would it be fair to say, Andy, let's say there was a major problem. Let's say the North Well had a catastrophic major problem.
Yeah.
You would probably come out and report that to shareholders at some point, right? Saying
Well,
this well is, whatever, something catastrophic has happened to it, and it's a material change, and we're telling you. So if you're not reporting something like that, is it fair to say shareholders should just relax and not be too concerned?
well, I mean, I'm not a securities lawyer, but I'm pretty sure that would be a material event. So we're actually, it wouldn't be optional. We would have to disclose that. So
All right.
we haven't. There's nothing wrong with it. It will run when we need it to run.
Second question that your team is hearing, and this one kind of makes me chuckle a little bit. Not the second part does. How many trailers have been delivered, and why are you telling us trailer by trailer? I find that part a little funny, but how many trailers have been delivered, and maybe not the. I think the answer is obvious to why not tell us trailer by trailer. No company in the world does that. Coca-Cola doesn't tell you time a trailer goes out the door. But maybe talk about what your future reporting metrics might look like or something, but how many trailers have been delivered? Can you answer? Yeah, you able to answer that first
Well,
ballpark?
we have our policy of not disclosing exactly how many went out because we just don't think it's relevant information. We're not going to set the precedent of disclosing all the time how many trailers we've sent. I'll say this, we've sent multiple trailers per month. So that should provide a little bit of color for everyone. The actual results will come out with our financial statements, right? It's going to be very easy to see. The math is simple based on our throughput and the helium concentration. It's pretty easy to back in to how many we should be sending every month. Again, we're not at capacity yet, so that's not the number. But we are loath to set the precedent of disclosing every time we send product to market.
No, I wouldn't let you do that
Yeah,
because that would be a little tedious.
yeah. I mean, and again, it doesn't change the economic thesis of behind the company. Like to know if we've shipped, 5 trailers or 7 trailers or 3 trailers. Does that really matter in the ramp up stage, George? I would suggest it doesn't. Um,
I'll tell you who it does matter to, and you kind of alluded to it at the intro, because this is where I said you stole my thunder. I have got here. Are the customer or customers, I'm not sure who, are they having the issue with this? Because that's really who you want to be concerned about it. If you have George Com, aerospace, and they're complaining, say, Andy, I thought you were going to be sending me 1,000 trailers a week, and you're only sending me 10, then you have a problem. But you kind of alluded to it.
Yeah.
How are the customers with this level of delivery and ramp up?
Yeah, well, I mean, I think our customer firmly understands the process of how these things turn on. So they're neither surprised nor disappointed with what we've been providing them. And frankly, while not at capacity yet, they're quite pleased with what we've been doing. The progress is noticeable. It's easy to see to them. The rate of delivery is increasing. They're happy. I mean, our relationship with them is as good as it's ever been.
Excellent. Next question. I'm hearing chatter, again, not me. These are questions coming in.
Yep.
I'm hearing chatter about helium being vented. Is that happening?
Yeah, of course. I mean, with our plant being a bit of a closed loop system, whenever it goes down or goes offline, generally the issue is something has frozen in our cryogenic unit. And remember, we operate this thing at like negative 200 degrees C, right? So if ice builds up in there, we have to thaw that out, and we thaw that out with our own production gas. And in those scenarios, because it's a closed loop and the plant is full, the gas that we use to thaw out those blockages, should they exist, is then vented. That's just the way the plant is designed. So, in a normal operating scenario, there is little to no venting of any helium product. The only thing that comes out the tailpipe is nitrogen. In this ramp up phase, there is some helium that goes with it. Again, this is another item that's being picked up by our, savvy shareholders going through government reporting data. But, as I've said to people who've asked me about this directly, I mean, data without context is not information. So if you look at a reported number and don't understand what that number actually means or where it's coming from, all it is an erroneous point that is going to be misinterpreted. And that's what's happening here. We are going through our normal ramp up that includes some helium venting in this process. It will not continue long term.
Next question, and this is a little more generic, so you probably can't get super specific. What kind of adjustments are being made? And I'm sure there are hundreds probably,
Yeah,
but maybe you can speak big picture kinds of adjustments that are being made.
sure. And I mean, it is literally anything you can think of in a plant like this needs to be tweaked at every different level. So like I mentioned earlier. So whether it be the temperature that we circulate through the amine system, or the burner temperatures at the front gate, or the circulation rate through the mole sieves, all of these things are adjusted on a minute by minute basis to ensure we achieve easy operation. There have been some more substantive changes that we've made, but I mean, substantive in this realm means we've changed a couple of valves out to different style of valves. And I mean, this is like $1,000 fix. It's not a major problem. And they're not things that shut us down either. So, you know, when we identify that we've got a problem with a valve that's passing stuff through it that shouldn't be, you know, we replace that valve, but we don't have to shut in production while we're doing it. So, but they all add up to time and loss. And so we have to make those adjustments, and it is what it is. But there's no component of the plant that is required shutdown for extended period of time. There's been no critical failures. This is just normal tweaking.
All right. Next question. When will we hear more details of when and which next developments will get started?
Yeah, so that was the topic of our last news release, George. It was, you know, identifying the
Yep.
fields that we intend to go to next. And really what you have there is a bit of a bake-off between these projects, in terms of where the big capital gets allocated next. And in our case, the big capital is obviously the plant construction. So we suspect it'll be post breakup, and breakup in the oil and gas sector is when the ground thaws and there are some road ban restrictions that come in, and that's generally March, April in our operating area. So shortly after that, we'll be out in the field getting this done. And these are not long capital intensive programs that we've laid out. I mean, we're lucky in that we have these wells already drilled for the most part. The Val Marie tests and the Ogama tests will be relatively easy and straightforward to complete. The Oakville ones are a matter of $250,000 to go open up and test a zone. That's pretty straightforward. Then it's just a matter of windowing out the service rigs that we need to complete that. And the oil patch is still humming, and so we are somewhat restricted on our timelines. So we're looking end Q2 probably to get that stuff done. The property we're really excited about that we haven't drilled yet is this one we call 40 Mile in southern Alberta. That requires drilling wells. So that's the largest portion of the development plan that we're rolling out this year. It's one of the more interesting project areas that we've ever come across. It's got historic wells on it with historic helium tests and flow rates and all of the data that you need to evaluate a helium project. And it's important to know when you're looking at a helium project, you know, the helium percentage is obviously very, very important, but it's how that relates to the flow rate from the well. It's those two things. Any one number is irrelevant. The two of them, how they work together, is relevant. So, I mean, it's easy to have you know, we can have a 4% helium well that doesn't flow. And I mean, that looks pretty, but it does nothing. And the same is true if you have a very high flow formation with zero helium. Again, the one number is great, but when the two numbers work together, the project doesn't work. So the nice thing about 40 Mile is we have both data points already. And so it's really a matter of going and twinning an old well. So that's the more impactful, the bigger news piece of that development plan is what's happening in 40 Mile. And then when we evaluate the three of those together, those three fields, that will determine where plant 2 and 3 goes. And that's all weighing off the climax field, which we already know. So one of those or two of those 4 fields will get plants 2 and 3.
So I think you've kind of answered it, but I want to just put it out there. Because you kind of blend into that. When and how will you announce the next facilities? You mentioned you want 2 more. Did you have any more to add to that answer there?
Well, I think we have a very good idea already about what type of plant and where we're gonna, how we're gonna build it. So I wouldn't be surprised if we have some news over what we're building before we have news about where we're building it. If that makes sense to you, George. So we're down that path a long ways already in terms of designing the next two and including adjustments things we've learned from the building of one. They'll be fundamentally the same with a couple of tweaks, like the valves we replaced at Steveville. We're not going to be using those type of valves again. Those kind of differences. That's it. So I would suggest again the timeline is going to be pretty similar. I mean, we're into the first half of this year, hopefully, to get both the development plan kicked off and the construction contracts awarded, and if not started.
And you're not just saying that here in an interview. I'm going to take an excerpt from your quote where you say, for the record, for the whole world to read, we're pleased to be focused on determining the site for the next processing facilities. This is firmly the goal of all development work that will be completed in 2024. Given the drilling activities completed 2021-22, Royal is uniquely positioned to move from one facility to multiple in the short term. I mean, you're not mincing words there. You're not saying and maybe and if the yin and the yang. You're pretty confident what you're saying.
No, we tend to be pretty direct when we know exactly what we're doing, and we do in this case. So that is what we're doing. We are building towards plant 2 and 3. Plant 1 is being focused on by our engineering team. They are bringing that up to capacity. But we've got a company to build in the background too, right? I mean, we're not satisfied with one. This is not a single project company. This is a multi-project company that is going to differentiate itself as not just the second largest helium producer in Canada, but essentially a junior industrial gas company by the time we start monetizing things like CO2 and other throughput products. So it's a pretty unique opportunity when you look at what Royal has relative to other companies out there. The helium market itself remains exceptionally strong. The latest data point we've seen is a contract that was released by the Department of Defense at a price of $1,000 US per MCF for grade B gas.
Wow, because when you and I first started talking, if I remember the numbers loosely, you talked about $350 like a year and a half ago, $350 and kind of $500. I believe the second offtake agreement you had was at 700, if 7 and change.
Yeah.
Now you're saying it's up to $1,000.
Yes, that is a market price. We're not suggesting that we're going to sell it for that, but that's a data point that's in the market.
What's behind that? What's behind that, Andrew? Is it I mean, obviously is demand. Is it mostly demand? Is it also maybe decreasing supply somewhere that we don't know about because of Russia and Ukraine or something? What's leading to that?
It's a bit of both, but I would say the largest driver is certainly demand, right? I mean, and historically in the helium market, demand has met supply, pure and simple. But with things happening in North America, like the onshoring of semiconductor manufacturing, the continued growth in space exploration, causing a lot of competitive tension on the molecules that exist, because all of the other industries that have used it forever, whether it be healthcare or defense, or their needs aren't going down. They are staying stable or going up. And so it's causing a huge issue on the supply side. And that's not news. We've talked about that for 2 years. It continues. And the pricing pressure is continuing. I mean, when we started this thing, as we mentioned before, we've stress tested most of our projects at a price of $125 per MCF. And if it doesn't pass there, they don't move forward. We're now, approaching 10 times that in terms of market price.
And to that end, because of increased demand, I'm gonna colloquially ask this question: is the phone still ringing at Royal Helium? Because obviously you've got 2 big customers.
Yep.
But I'm gonna presume, but I want you to answer. Obviously, are you getting more calls from George Com Aerospace or George Com Semiconductor or something like that? Just saying, hey, when will you guys be ready? When we have more capacity, can we talk? Or are you happy with
the conversations are all about when will you have volumes for sale? That's what they're about. And We provide some guidance to potential customers over when we think we'll be bringing volumes to market, and then we either start the offtake discussions now, or we push it out a couple months until we get closer. And really, that's at the discretion of the potential customer. We're fine doing it either way. And this is not something that's unique to Royal either, George. I mean, other companies that are out there and developing are selling or entering into offtakes now. I mean, if every one of us, and there's, I don't know, 9 or 10 now, helium companies, if they all sold all of the gas that they could potentially produce, it still wouldn't put the market in balance.
Wow.
Yeah.
So the future for now, from a demand point of view, for your core product is looking good for 2-3 years out.
Yeah, no, we're quite confident. And remember the offtake agreements that we talk about, like with ours, I mean, that's a price that goes out 3 years. So our economics are set for 3 years, and they're quite strong. The same is true for new contracts getting signed now. I mean, there are no short-term daily contracts or monthly contracts. Those would be in the spot market range, and they would be far more valuable than even what I told you before. So the economics around producing helium and associated gases over the next 3 years looks very, very strong.
I think that's music to my ears. I'm a shareholder. It's music to my ears.
Mine
I'm sure
too.
a lot of shareholders are going to be happy to hear that. And more importantly, I think they're going to be really happy to finally kind of alleviate any chat board concerns out there about these items that are kind of floating around, and I appreciate it. I think everyone appreciates that I ask you direct questions. These are pretty much direct questions that have come in from shareholders. Your team kind of amalgamated them into the most common. I'm sure there are others, but these are the big, the ones. Last word to you. We're going to sign off because that's all the questions. Any last words to you, Andy?
Well, I think what's important is watching the progress that we're making on the capacity side. And we've said before, and we'll say it again here, once we get to capacity, we'll let the world know that we're there. Between now and then, there's no point in making announcements because we produce at 10 million cubic feet today, but it could be 9.5 tomorrow or 11.5 tomorrow. I mean, it's variable right now, but things are going very well. We're producing as high as 6 nines helium gas from time to time. The plant is working terrifically. The efficiency of it is strong. We've had no problems making specified grade whatsoever. It's a terrific plant that is working its way towards capacity. And at the same time, we're planning where to build the next 2. And it's going to be a pretty exciting, short term. And for me, short term is, 18 to 24 months. I mean, it's growth time, and it's time for this company to sort of escape from the exploration risk side of the ledger and into, hey, we're a development company now with fixed economics and offtakes that are definable. The economic value of any one of these plants is enormous. Like to the tune of $100 million is the economic value of a plant. So it's a unique industry. We're a unique player within it. Stay tuned. We'll have lots more to say.
Continued success, Andy. Thanks for joining us today. Can't wait to have you back, my friend.
Thanks, George. Appreciate it.
To anybody at home, you've been watching or you've been listening to my podcast on Spotify, Google, Apple, your favorite podcast platform. To Andrew Davidson, he's the CEO of Royal Helium, trades in Canada, RHC, for friends in the US, RHCCF. If you happen to stumble on this Q&A for existing shareholders, but you're a new prospective shareholder and you like what you heard, start your due diligence at Agoracom, where we give you a good 30,000-foot layman's overview of what Royal Helium does. But make sure you head over to the company's website, do your deep dive due diligence. Thanks for joining us. Have a great day. See you next time.
Hey Small Cap fam, I hope you loved this interview because more than a dozen people were involved in its production for the sole purpose of making you happy. If so, can you take a moment to support both our awesome guest company and Agoracom? Your engagement means the world to us. First, if you enjoyed this video, give us a thumbs up by tapping that like button. It's a small gesture that helps this interview reach even more potential investors to discover today's guest. Second, we would love to hear your feedback on this interview, so please leave a comment below. Be sure to keep it clean, but feel free to poke fun at George. If you loved what you heard on today's video and want to dig into our guest company right away, Take a look at the links in the description below. And while you're at it, hit that subscribe button and ring the notification bell to never miss another great Agora Comms small cap video. Thank you so much. We couldn't do any of this without you. Make sure to come back soon.